Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Years ago, I began recording the bedtime stories I told my children every night. Now, we would like to share those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children. Now, I've told you before the story of Flibbertygibit's nephew, Flip-Flop, and his crazy sense of humor, and how when Flibbertygibit goes on vacation, Flip-Flop comes and watches things for him in the kingdom until Flibbertygibit gets back. But what I haven't told you is where Flip-Flop lives the rest of the time. Because Flip-Flop has such a crazy sense of humor, even though he is royalty, he doesn't like to rule over an ordinary country or an ordinary set of problems. Instead, Flip-Flop lives in something called the Elysium. Now, the Elysium is sort of a fun park, except it's for cats. And it is located not any place that people could find it. You know how Santa Claus's workshop is hidden at the North Pole? Well, the Elysium is hidden at the South Pole. So you would go south until you were entirely surrounded by ice. But if you had a map that showed you where the Elysium was, or if you had a cat to guide you who knew where it was, or if you had taken the Cat's Paw Highway, you would come out in a valley. And as you went down that valley, you would come to a point where the snow and ice would stop. It wouldn't sort of taper off. It would stop as if a line had been drawn on the ground, and on one side of the line, it would be covered with ice and snow, and on the other side of the line, there would be grass, and if you stepped over that line, you would feel warm, and you would have to take off your thick coat and your gloves and your scarf and your mittens and your snow pants and your boots because you would be too hot. The warmth of the Elysium is maintained by a special kind of cat magic, and it is Flip-Flop's job to watch over the Elysium and to make sure that the cat magic continues to work in the way that it should, and to make sure that everybody who comes to the Elysium has fun. Cats come there from all over the world. They ride the rides. They walk in the catnip gardens. They sleep in the meadows. They chase butterflies. And there is no one else around but cats, and they enjoy laying in the warm, warm sun. And they enjoy playing and being the victim of practical jokes. Because, of course, Flip-Flop is the guardian of the Elysium. And he loves to play his practical jokes. He will sneak up behind a cat that is taking a cat nap in the sun, and he'll take a whoopee cushion and tuck it right up underneath the cat, so then when it rolls over in its sleep, the whoopee cushion goes like that, and the cat wakes up. And sometimes he gets the cat so well the cat thinks that it passed gas, and it'll say, "Excuse me." Anyway, he likes to do other things too. Sometimes on the water rides, he likes to put ice cubes in the water to make it extra cold. And that's certainly a surprise. And he loves to tell jokes. But even though he does all these fun things, he takes his job of guardian of the Elysium very seriously. Well, one day, Flip-Flop had just finished playing a practical joke on a kitten, where Flip-Flop had taken saran wrap and had wrapped it tightly over the doorway to one of the kiddie rides, and when the kittens ran up, they ran right into the saran wrap and didn't see it coming. They just ran right into it and poof, and bounced off. And they laughed and laughed and laughed. Well, after he had finished playing that practical joke, Flip-Flop realized that it was time for his daily walk around of the Elysium to make sure that everything was as it should be. He walked around and checked the rides. He checked the ball ride where you could jump into big pits full of balls. He checked the water rides and made sure that they were operating correctly. He walked through the catnip gardens and made sure that no one was picking more catnip than they were allowed to. He checked the butterfly meadows and made sure there were enough butterflies for all the cats who wanted to chase butterflies. He went by the kitchen and he checked the lasagna and the cat food cooks and made sure that everything was going to be ready for the night's meal. Well, then he began a walk around of the very edge of the Elysium. He walked right up to the edge where he could see the snow on the other side of the line, and he began his walk. Well, as he walked around, everything seemed just fine. He looked and the line was where it should be. And then a little kitten ran up to him. The little kitten said, "Mr. Flip-Flop, Mr. Flip-Flop." And Flip-Flop said, "Why, yes, Wilbur," because that was the kitten's name, was Wilbur. And Wilbur said, "Come see, Mr. Flip-Flop, I found something strange." And so Flip-Flop followed him, and he saw that Wilbur was leading him to a tree. And as he got closer to the tree, Flip-Flop looked around, looking for what had Wilbur so excited, and he said, "I don't understand. Is this a joke, Wilbur?" And Wilbur said, "No, Mr. Flip-Flop, look at the tree." And Flip-Flop looked at it for a minute. It was a beautiful tree with the leaves green and turning orange and yellow and red, and Flip-Flop gasped. The leaves turning? The leaves weren't supposed to turn on the trees in the Elysium. The cat magic kept it always summer. This wasn't right. Something was wrong. The leaves were changing color as if fall were coming. Flip-Flop said, "Thank you, Wilbur. I'm gonna look around a bit." "Okay, bye-bye, Mr. Flip-Flop." "You have fun, Wilbur," said Flip-Flop. And he began to walk around the edge of the Elysium, looking at the trees. And as he walked, he could see that about a quarter of the trees had leaves that had turned, at least a few leaves that had turned orange or red or yellow. Well, Flip-Flop became worried. He ran to the central building of the Elysium where the magic was stored that kept the weather of the Elysium always summer. The magic was centered in a jewel that Flibbertygibit had given him. The jewel was shaped like a cat's face, and it was a clear color, and it always pulsed with sort of a golden light. Well, Flip-Flop ran in to check on the jewel, and the jewel looked just fine. It was pulsing with a golden light. And Flip-Flop then ran to the other wall, and he looked at the thermometer on the wall. And the thermometer read 69 degrees. Flip-Flop said, "Oh no." The magic of the cat jewel was supposed to always keep the temperature at the Elysium at exactly 76 degrees. If it was 69 degrees, that meant that it was too cold, and it meant that there was something wrong. Just then, Flip-Flop heard something that made his blood run cold. It was a sound like this. Flip-Flop spun around. There, standing next to the cat jewel, was a fairy. He was dressed all in blue from his head to his toes, and he had icicles dripping off the ends of his nose and the lobes of his ears and the tips of his fingers. Flip-Flop said, "The Elysium's for cats only. I'm sorry, you can't stay." "Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm afraid none of you are going to be staying at the Elysium much longer, though. You see, I'm a frost fairy. My name is Frostbite, and I don't like the fact that you have ruined my perfectly good frost that's in the middle of my perfectly good kingdom. And I intend to use my magic to turn it to winter in the Elysium. Flip-Flop said, You can't. And what are you talking about? This isn't your kingdom. This is the South Pole. No one lives here. Ha! Shows what you know. The frost fairies have always ruled the South Pole. And this frost fairy is going to make sure it stays that way. Flip-Flop said, Well, I am the guardian of the Elysium, and I will not let you do anything to ruin this place where we only come to have fun. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. And then Flip-Flop was about to pull out his itching powder and throw it on Frostbite to make him itch. It was sort of one of his practical jokes. He would put itching powder on people and make them itch a little bit. And if you put just a little bit, then it's a funny joke. But if you put a lot of it, it just makes them scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch. Well, as he was pulling it out, Frostbite said, Have we seen you around? And then he disappeared in a puff of snow. Flip-Flop looked around. The cat gem was still pulsing, although as he looked at it, it seemed to him that its glow was more of an orange than a gold. He stepped outside and sucked in his breath. He could see that now, everywhere he looked, every tree in the Elysium was starting to have its leaves change color. And he could even see a few leaves of the trees out on the very edge of the Elysium were starting to lose their leaves. Flip-Flop did the first thing he could think of that he needed to do. He said, I have an announcement, everyone. We're going to have to stay out of the water rides. There seems to be something that makes the weather turning a little bit colder, and I don't want anybody to catch cold. Also, because there may be a problem, I want everybody to get ready to leave. So pack your things in case we have to take the Cat's Paw Highway. Then he went to the edge of the Elysium. He could see something that now really made him nervous. The sharp line in the snow, with the green grass on the other side of it, was no longer sharp. Little drifts of snow were starting to drift in over that line. Flip-Flop turned. He ran back and announced to everyone, I'm sorry, everyone who's here for vacation is going to have to leave. There seems to be a problem. There's a frost fairy named Frostbite, and he's trying to destroy the Elysium. Until I can defeat him, I need everyone to leave to keep you safe. And all the cats who were there to enjoy the fun of the Elysium lined up and began disappearing off along the Cat's Paw Highway. As he left, the little kitten who had talked to him earlier, Wilbur, turned and said, Flip-Flop, you won't let him hurt the Elysium, will you? No, said Flip-Flop. No, this Joker cat has lots of tricks still up his sleeve. As the last cat disappeared along the Cat's Paw Highway, Flip-Flop went in to where the cat gem was. He noticed that it was now definitely glowing a dark, dull orange. He wrote several notes and sent them along the Cat's Paw Highway to people who he thought may be able to help, might be able to tell him what was going on and how Frostbite was influencing the gem. As he turned to look, he hoped that they hurried. Already, most of the trees in the Elysium had lost many of their leaves. Well, help did indeed come to Flip-Flop, and he did indeed find out more about what Frostbite was planning. But that is a story for tomorrow night.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was created by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it or leave a review on your podcast provider. Our website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com, and you can also find us on most social media. I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.